For most people, Smokey and the Bandit feels like pure fun, fast cars, loud jokes, a movie that never stops smiling. But behind that grin was a production that nearly collapsed under its own chaos. You had a lead actor so powerful the studio couldn't afford to lose him, a supporting character who ignored the script entirely, car chases so real they almost ended in arrests, and a film everyone expected to fail until it didn't. This wasn't a carefully engineered hit. It was a gamble built on improvisation, ego, and last-minute decisions that no studio would approve today. And somewhere inside that chaos, something rare happened. A movie that shouldn't have worked became iconic. These are 15 strange, overlooked truths about Smokey and the Bandit. And one bonus story so bizarre, it involves a cartoon voice, network television, and a version of the movie most fans never knew existed. Buckle up, because this story doesn't get cleaner, it gets messier. Number 1. To most people, the premise of Smokey and the Bandit sounds like a joke. Haul a truckload of beer across state lines, outrun the law, get paid, roll credits. But in the 1970s, that setup wasn't fictional at all. It was illegal, very illegal. At the time, Coors beer was unpasteurized, no preservatives, no shelf life. It had to stay cold from brewery to bottle. Because of that, federal law restricted where it could be sold. Anything east of the Mississippi required specialized refrigeration systems that most distributors didn't have, so people smuggled it. Truck drivers ran overnight routes, convoys used spotters, drivers memorized back roads and police patterns. Coors became a black market prize, especially in the South, where demand was high and supply was non-existent. The idea for Smokey and the Bandit didn't come from a screenwriter trying to sound clever. It came from real experiences. Members of the production team had already tangled with law enforcement while transporting Coors beer to a film set. What sounded outrageous on screen had already happened off camera. That's why the movie never feels exaggerated. It feels familiar, almost documentary-like. When Bandit jokes his way through roadblocks and sheriff traps, he isn't playing fantasy. He's reenacting a subculture that actually existed, one built on speed, timing, and the assumption that you could outrun consequences if you were bold enough. That first chase isn't a cartoon. It's a snapshot of a very specific moment in American history, filmed just before it disappeared. Number 2. By the time Smokey and the Bandit entered production, Burt Reynolds wasn't just a movie star. He was the biggest star in America. Universal knew it, and they paid accordingly. Reynolds was offered over $1 million for the role, more than the combined salaries of most of the supporting cast and crew. It was an unheard-of figure for a comedy that the studio itself didn't fully believe in. The imbalance was obvious. Everyone on set knew who the movie revolved around, and not everyone was happy about it. Tension simmered behind the scenes. Some crew members resented the pay gap. Others quietly wondered if the film was being built around one personality instead of a solid plan. Then, halfway through production, the studio made its move. Universal slashed the budget. Schedules tightened. Resources vanished. Corners were cut. The message was clear. The studio was losing confidence. Reynolds didn't negotiate. He didn't compromise. He made it simple. "If I walk," he said, "this movie dies." It wasn't a threat. It was a fact. Without him, there was no Bandit. No charisma to hold the chaos together. No star powerful enough to sell the madness. Universal backed down. Reynolds kept his salary. And from that moment on, everyone understood something critical. This wasn't a studio film anymore. It was Burt Reynolds' film. And that power shift would shape everything that followed. Number 3. When casting began, the studio had a problem with Sally Field. Universal executives didn't think she fit the movie. They said she wasn't glamorous enough, not sexy enough, not the kind of woman who belonged in a loud, fast Southern comedy built around car chases and swagger. To them, she was television. Safe, soft, replaceable. Burt Reynolds disagreed. He didn't just suggest her for the role, he insisted. Reynolds saw something the studio overlooked: timing, intelligence, emotional weight. He understood that Smokey and the Bandit didn't need another stereotype riding shotgun. It needed contrast. The studio resisted. Meetings dragged on. Alternatives were discussed. Reynolds didn't budge. Eventually, Universal gave in. That decision didn't just shape the movie, it changed its tone. Field brought warmth into a film built on chaos. Her presence grounded the jokes, softened the edges, and made Bandit feel human instead of cartoonish. What the studio feared would weaken the film ended up balancing it, and without realizing it, they had approved something else entirely. Because Sally Field didn't just join the cast, she stepped into Reynolds' life. Number 4. The chemistry audiences saw on screen wasn't manufactured. It was happening in real time. During production, Burt Reynolds and Sally Field began a relationship that blurred the line between performance and reality. They shared trailers, they improvised dialogue, their rhythm spilled into scenes that were never meant to feel that personal. Sometimes the cameras kept rolling because no one wanted to interrupt the moment. But off-screen, the same chemistry created pressure. Two strong personalities, two careers accelerating at different speeds. Fame magnified everything: affection, conflict, expectations. The relationship continued long after filming ended, stretching across years of breakups, reconciliations, and tabloid attention. It was intense, complicated, and ultimately unsustainable. Years later, Sally Field would describe it as one of the most difficult relationships of her life. And near the end of his life, Burt Reynolds admitted something publicly. Not marrying her was his greatest regret. That admission reframed the movie for many fans. What looked like playful flirtation suddenly carried weight. The smiles in that Trans Am weren't just acting, they were fragments of something real, captured on film before it fell apart. And that reality gave Smokey and the Bandit something no script could plan. A beating emotional core hiding beneath all the noise. Number 5. Sheriff Buford T. Justice didn't just dominate scenes, he hijacked the entire movie. What most audiences never realized is that a huge portion of his dialogue was never written down. Jackie Gleason barely used the script. He treated it as a suggestion, not a rule. On set, Gleason improvised relentlessly. Insults, threats, rants, reactions. Many of the film's most quoted lines came straight out of his mouth in the moment, delivered without warning. The crew eventually stopped trying to control it. Writers stopped rewriting his scenes. Directors stopped correcting him. They simply let the cameras roll. One of the most iconic lines in the film about lineage, humiliation, and rage was made up on the spot. Even Burt Reynolds struggled to keep a straight face. Sometimes his laughter stayed in the take because cutting it would kill the energy. Gleason didn't play Buford T. Justice. He became him. That raw, uncontrolled performance turned what could have been a one-note antagonist into something unforgettable. Loud, absurd, furious, human. The chaos wasn't polished, and that's exactly why it worked. Number 6. Jerry Reed was never supposed to be Snowman. In fact, he wasn't cast until the night before filming began. The role had bounced between actors and musicians. None of them clicked. Time ran out. With production about to start, Burt Reynolds made a call. He didn't want a trained actor. He wanted someone who felt real. Reed arrived with no preparation time, no rehearsals, no safety net. He put on a cowboy hat, climbed into the truck, and figured it out as the cameras rolled. Within days, Snowman stopped feeling like a supporting character. He became the movie's heartbeat, relaxed, loyal, effortlessly cool. And then Reed did something else no one planned for. He wrote the soundtrack during production. Eastbound and Down wasn't pre-written. It emerged alongside the film itself, shaping its rhythm and identity in real time. What started as a casting emergency turned into one of the most recognizable themes in American cinema. The movie didn't just find its character, it found its sound. Number 7. Buford T. Justice wasn't purely fictional. Jackie Gleason based the character on a real highway patrolman he had once encountered during a traffic stop in Florida. The man was loud, foul-mouthed, unpredictable, and strangely magnetic. Gleason never forgot him. To sharpen the performance, he spent time with real Southern lawmen during production, studying their posture, cadence, and attitude. He exaggerated everything, but the foundation was real. That's why Buford never feels like a cartoon, no matter how outrageous he becomes. Beneath the shouting and insults is a recognizable type, a man obsessed with authority, reputation, control. He wasn't born on the page. He was pulled from the back roads of the South and amplified for the screen. That blend of reality and exaggeration gave the character weight, and it anchored the film's comedy in something authentic, even when it spiraled into madness. By this point, Smokey and the Bandit had fully abandoned structure. What remained was instinct, and the chaos was only getting louder. Number 8. Pontiac didn't just sponsor the movie. They handed the production 4 brand new Trans Ams and trusted the filmmakers to take care of them. That trust didn't last long. The car chases were brutal. Dirt roads, high-speed turns, jumps that pushed the frames beyond their limits. Within weeks, the cars were falling apart. Suspensions cracked, axles bent, frames warped. By the end of filming, all 4 Trans Ams were destroyed. The crew got desperate. They scavenged parts from wrecked vehicles, repainted damaged panels, and used whatever materials they had left to keep one car looking presentable long enough to finish each shot. What audiences saw as a sleek, unstoppable machine was often held together by spare parts, rushed repairs, and pure hope. That black and gold Trans Am didn't survive because it was strong. It survived because the production refused to slow down. Number 9. There was no CGI, no digital cleanup, no safety net. Burt Reynolds didn't want tricks. He wanted authenticity. Against studio advice, he insisted on driving during many of the high-speed scenes himself. He pushed the car hard, too hard, according to safety coordinators. But Reynolds believed the audience could feel the difference between staged motion and real danger. He was right. Every skid, every near miss, every airborne jump was practical. When the car flew, it actually flew. When tires screamed, it wasn't added later in post-production. The risk was constant. One wrong calculation could have ended the film or someone's career. But that danger translated directly to the screen. The tension felt earned because it was. The sweat was real. The fear was real. That's why the action still holds up decades later. Not because it's flashy, because it's honest. Number 10. At one point, the production shut down a highway to film a chase scene. Permits were in place. The crew knew what they were doing. Someone else didn't. A real police officer, unaware a movie was being filmed, drove onto the set mid-take. What he saw looked nothing like a controlled production. Cars were speeding, no visible safety barriers. What appeared to be an illegal street race unfolding in front of him. He flipped on his siren. He stepped out of his car, and he nearly arrested the stunt team on the spot. It took several tense minutes to explain that everything he was witnessing was staged. By the time the confusion cleared, the shot was ruined. But the story remained. The scene looked real because it was real enough to fool law enforcement. The movie had crossed the boundary between fiction and reality so completely that even professionals couldn't tell the difference. And that moment summed up the entire production. Smokey and the Bandit didn't imitate danger. It lived inside it. Number 11. From the beginning, the studio never fully believed in the movie. To Universal, Smokey and the Bandit looked like a regional gamble, a loud southern comedy built on car chases, crude jokes, and a premise that didn't translate well on paper. Executives quietly assumed it would play well below the Mason-Dixon line and nowhere else. Halfway through production, that doubt turned into action. The budget was cut, staff was reduced, schedules were tightened, locations were reused, scenes were compressed or reimagined on the fly. The message from the studio was clear. Finish the movie, but don't expect help. What followed wasn't efficiency. It was survival. The cast and crew adjusted instinctively. They stopped waiting for approvals. They made decisions in the moment. If something worked, they kept it. If it didn't, they moved on without discussion. Ironically, those limitations sharpened the film. Without studio interference, the production leaned harder into its identity. Faster pacing, looser dialogue, less polish, more momentum. When the film was released, the studio's doubts collapsed. Smokey and the Bandit exploded at the box office, becoming one of the highest-grossing films of 1977, outperforming critically praised titles like Annie Hall and Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Universal had given up on the movie. The audience didn't. Number 12. The ending audiences know wasn't the original plan. Early drafts of the script leaned toward something darker, more grounded. Bandit facing consequences, a slower, reflective conclusion that closed the story instead of extending it. During filming, the cast and crew felt the problem immediately. The tone was wrong. After everything, the movie had become fast, reckless, playful. That ending felt heavy. It punished a character the audience had grown attached to. It slowed momentum at the exact moment it should have lifted off. So they scrapped it. No formal rewrite, no extended reshoots, just a collective decision driven by instinct. The ending was reshaped into something lighter, open-ended, almost defiant. Bandit and Snowman laughing their way into another run didn't resolve the story. It continued it. That choice defined the film's legacy. Instead of closing a chapter, the movie invited the audience to imagine the chase never really ends. And that instinctive decision made under pressure, without studio approval, gave the film exactly the send-off it needed. Not a lesson, not a warning, just motion. Number 13. When Smokey and the Bandit premiered, critics weren't impressed. Some called it dumb, others dismissed it as disposable. A noisy, lowbrow comedy with no substance and no future. One prominent critic gave it a lukewarm rating and moved on. Audiences did the opposite. The film caught fire almost immediately. Word spread fast. The laughs landed. The pacing worked. The energy felt different from everything else in theaters at the time. By the end of its run, Smokey and the Bandit had grossed over $120 million, becoming the second highest grossing film of 1,977, outranked only by Star Wars. It outperformed movies critics championed. It outlived movies critics praised. The divide was clear. This wasn't a critic's film. It was a people's film, and history sided with the crowd. Number 14. Pontiac never expected what happened next. They had loaned the production 4 Trans Ams, assuming the movie would offer modest exposure at best. Instead, the film turned the car into a symbol. After release, Trans Am sales surged. Dealerships couldn't keep them on the lot. In some regions, demand nearly doubled within months. The black and gold 1,977 Trans Am became inseparable from the film. It wasn't just a vehicle, it was an attitude, speed, defiance, freedom. Burt Reynolds didn't just drive that car, he rebranded it. Decades later, the image still holds. The car flying across a dirt road, the eagle on the hood, the sense that it could outrun anything chasing it. Few movies create icons that survive their era. Smokey and the Bandit did it accidentally. Number 15. Of all the people who admired Smokey and the Bandit, one name stood out above all others: Alfred Hitchcock. The master of suspense, the architect of control, a filmmaker obsessed with precision, planning, and restraint. According to crew accounts, Hitchcock watched the movie multiple times. He praised its pacing, its rhythm, its movement. He reportedly called it a perfect example of American filmmaking, not because it was serious, but because it knew exactly what it was. That endorsement reframed everything. The movie built on chaos earned respect from the man most associated with discipline. The film that broke rules impressed the director who invented them. When Hitchcock says a movie works, you don't debate it. You press play again. When Smokey and the Bandit was edited for television, there was a problem. Jackie Gleason's dialogue was too crude for prime time, too aggressive, too filthy. So the network made a decision that would become legendary. They replaced his voice. Not with another actor trying to match the performance, but with Mel Blanc, the voice behind Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, and Fred Flintstone. The result was surreal. Sheriff Buford T. Justice chasing Bandit with the voice of a Saturday morning cartoon character. Threats softened into nonsense. Rage turned into parody. For TV audiences, that was the version they knew. Many never realized how explosive Gleason's original performance really was. It was censorship by transformation, and somehow, it made the movie even stranger. Smokey and the Bandit wasn't built to last. It was rushed, underestimated, cut down mid-production, held together by improvisation and instinct. And yet, it survived. Not because it followed rules, but because it ignored them. Because when the system stepped back, people stepped forward. If this story changed how you see the movie, let us know which number surprised you the most. And ask yourself one question. Was this film a lucky accident, or proof that chaos sometimes knows exactly what it's doing? Thanks for watching.